Next up, we have the future of blockchain and finance. We have our first speaker, who is Mr. Willie Khoo. He's the product and strategy manager at Electrify Asia, which is a blockchain company that allows energy products and consumers to transact with each other on a peer-to-peer trading platform. So let's welcome Mr. Willie Khoo.
Hi, I don't have slides, so you're going to have to imagine, okay? So I'm Willie. I work on product strategy and marketing communications at Electrify Asia. We are a blockchain platform that essentially connects energy consumers and producers, allowing them to trade directly with one another. So the goal really is to increase the proliferation of renewable energy assets. And we also want consumers to really be more conscious of where their energy and electricity is coming from. A bit about myself, I have a bit of a background in blockchain and social impact, and I've always been interested in sort of marrying the two together. But let's just get right into it. So in mapping the future of fintech and blockchain, I think it's always important to consider the people in the space. So the blockchain space is a fascinating one. It's like a very bizarre play with many plot twists and strange characters. So in each of these characters, they have their own competing visions of what they're actually working towards. So off the top of my head, I can think of two main groups, and obviously within each group there will be differences and fragmentation, right? But I think the first group is you have these developers who they wear rainbow unicorn T-shirts, right? They come from a more cypherpunk tradition, and they probably do a lot of LSD, right? The vision they are working towards tends to be quite radical and hyper-libertarian, especially when it comes to organizational governance. Some time ago, I think Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum, wrote a paper about futarchy, so Futarchy. It's basically a model of government that is not based on politicians, but on prediction markets. So essentially, you are harnessing the wisdom of the crowd through token incentives and getting people to vote on values, but bet on beliefs to decide policies. So that's one future, and I'm happy to talk about this later. Then you have the finance crowd, right? These are the old dogs from incumbent institutions that really want to stay relevant, right? So the future here is one of acquisition or collaboration. These incumbents will most likely acquire fintech startups in their front end or just work alongside them, right? In co-working spaces today, you're seeing the sprouting up of not just these startups, but also the offshoot offices of these big organizations. They're there to soak up the creativity. They're there to learn from startups and also just incubate new ideas. So the future here is, I think, a bit more conventional, where the powers that be still are, but maybe in this case it's more inclusive and there might be more of a user focus, maybe, right? So these are just two main examples of possible technological pathways, and obviously there are a lot more out there, and I'm sure you have your own that you are rooting for as well, and I have my own, but I'm not going to tell you or prime you. But the larger, more important question is, how do you map out some of these futures and avoid the ones that you really don't want, right? So allow me to introduce this cautionary concept of technological somnambulism. So somnambulism basically means sleepwalking, right? It's a concept first coined by Langdon Winner, I think in the 80s. Basically, technological somnambulism explains how technology can reshape your political and social structures without you realizing it, right? It can reconstitute the very conditions of human existence, and you could be blind to it. The other aspect here is there is a lack of interaction between the makers and the users of technology, such that there becomes this gap leading to alienation and sleepwalking. So this sleepwalking happens precisely because people don't realize that technology is not value neutral, or rather, people think that technology is value neutral, and it's really not. Right? Technology is value laden. Why? Because technology is made by people, and people have values, right? So it follows that if you want to be more intentional about your technological pathways and you want to avoid technological sleepwalking, you should then excavate and really clarify these values embedded in our technology. So here are 2 questions that could be helpful, right? The first, on a more personal level, you should ask yourselves, what are your values, right? And then the second question is, what are the founding what are the founding principles of your disciplines, right? So you should now then check to see if your answers to these 2 questions actually align, and if they don't, if they dramatically depart, it might be a sign that you are sleepwalking technologically, right? That maybe some serious changes need to be made. Yeah. So to reiterate, right, you need to excavate and clarify these values embedded in our technology, and the way to do that is to really constantly look at people and processes. So one of the main processes right now around which many decisions are being made is regulation. Particularly within the blockchain, cybersecurity, and fintech spaces, there's this phenomenon right now known as management-based regulatory delegation. So it's a terrible mouthful, but it basically refers to a decision-making process where regulators approach private entities for help. So regulators, they need to step in and do their jobs, right? Regulate. But they often don't understand the emerging frontier technologies because they're just so emerging and frontier. And regulators also have so many other things to do. So you can't really fault them, right? Recall the recent Facebook hearing. I think there was this senator who was asking, how do you send a WhatsApp email or something like that, right? It was a kind of facepalm moment. But again, you can't really fault them. And so who do they turn to, right? They will turn to these well-connected, massive private entities who have the most expertise. They have the data and the superior knowledge about the threats that exist within the space. So then they have these closed-door discussions, and this is probably one of the most efficient ways to make regulation in the tech space right now. But you can also see how it gets problematic, right? In Singaporean parlance, there's this phrase, own self, check own self. Some of you might know this. Basically, what happens is you could have these private entities creating their own rules and then adhering to them, right? And then there could be a race to the bottom in terms of compliance. Also, in such cases, you get this dynamic where the makers of the tech and regulation are so far removed from the end users that it creates more technological sleepwalking. So how do you avoid some of these problems, right, in moving towards more ideal fintech futures? I would say we need more consultative governance. We need to democratize the decision-making processes. We need to introduce more diversity, right? The easiest solution would be to bring more people into the space from different backgrounds, different ideologies and fields. But bringing more people is not enough. So now, how many of you here are from the regulation space? Just a show of hands. How many of you here are from the finance side of things? How many of you are developers? Okay. So how many of you can confidently say that you sit at the intersection of all of these fields? Oh yeah, so that's the solution right there. She's the one. What we need is not just more people, right, but more interdisciplinary people. We need to have more of these translators of information at the table, or what you could call knowledge brokers, right? These are the ones who sit at the intersection of all these fields and can not only facilitate the conversation, but also negotiate the values between different stakeholders. And how do we get more of these types of people? I think this was alluded to earlier in one of the talks. We need to increase interdisciplinary education. We need to, like the liberal arts and sciences, for example. We need to train people, especially the youths, right, to be more conversant and steeped in different fields all at the same time, right? Like economics, law, coding, technology, but also the philosophy of technology. And I think on the workforce side of things, you need employers to value these sorts of individuals who sit at the intersection and possess these lateral thinking skills. So I think I'll just close with this. The word fintech, right, is a portmanteau, right? It's a combination of the words finance and technology. So if we really want this fintech space to thrive, we need more portmanteau people, right? Only then can we move towards these different pathways that are more intentional, inclusive, and awake. Yeah, that's all from me. Thank you.